Shalom and welcome to Weekly Torah Talks, where we will begin sharing a Torah message relative both to your lives and to the Beit HaMikdash each and every week. My name is Shlomo and I am honored to begin sharing Torah with you. Last Friday, we began the month of Adar, the month in which the Jewish people celebrate the special miracle of Purim. We will explore that Purim story and its connection to the Beit HaMikdash in a later week. In addition to Purim, another unique aspect to this month is that each Shabbat, after the regular Torah reading, we read one of the so-called Arba Parshiot, one of 4 different sections of Torah that relate to events and themes of the month of Adar. The first of the Arba Parshiot, Parashat Shkalim, spoke about the half-shekel donation that during the times of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and the Beit HaMikdash, every Jewish male over the age of 20 was required to give. This week we will read the second of the Arba Parshiot of the 4 sections. This one is called Parashat Zachor, the Torah portion where we remember what Amalek did to us as we left Egypt and our obligation to eliminate them in due time. Everyone ready? Let's jump in. I want you to imagine the following scene. The Jewish people, after being enslaved to Egypt for 210 years in backbreaking labor and torture, where they built buildings only to sink into the sand, and where some of their babies were used as bricks in Egyptian pyramids, these destroyed and downtrodden people had just experienced the 10 plagues that rocked Egypt, and God topped it all off with the miraculous splitting of the Yam Suf, the splitting of the Sea of Reeds. The Jewish people, they marched triumphantly on dry land with walls of water all around them. Then Pharaoh, his soldiers, and his great chariots come rushing in to catch the Jews. But suddenly the walls of water, they lose their grace and come plummeting onto the Egyptians, erasing the threat and 210 years of slavery for good. God didn't need to take the Jewish people out in such a dramatic fashion. He could have, for example, rushed them all out of Egypt during the plague of darkness, Makat HaChoshech, where our sages tell us that not only was it pitch black, but as the 3 days of darkness continued, the darkness actually became thicker and thicker until it was impossible for the Egyptians to move at all. The Jews, they could have left then. Such a grandiose miracle as the splitting of the sea was unnecessary. So, why did God choose to free the Jews in such a way? The Sefer Chinuch, a 13th century commentator, explains that these miracles weren't just for the Jews to see the hand of God, but rather for all nations to get the message that the God of the Jews is the only true God. And just as he can change nature by splitting the sea, he is also in charge of nature, because in truth all of nature is miraculous. The fact that we can breathe, walk, talk, it's all a miracle. The functions of nature and human beings is something that humans will never be able to create. And God also wanted the nations to know that anyone who dares to raise a finger to his children will pay the price, because fighting with his children is like fighting and not believing in him and his power. So the message was clear, and the nations of the world heard it well and believed its tenets. The first instance we find this is by Yitro, a priest of Midian, and the soon-to-be father-in-law of Moshe, as the verse reads, "And Yitro, priest of Midian, heard all that God had done for Moshe and for Israel, God's people, how HaShem had brought Israel out from Egypt." Even after Moshe passes away, the dread of the Jewish people and their God remained on some of the nations, as we find Rachav the prostitute describe the fear of the citizens of Yericho in the 2nd chapter of the book of Yoshua, as she says, "For we have heard how God dried up the waters of the Sea of Reeds before you when you came out of Egypt. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither did there remain any more courage in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and on the earth beneath." All the nations were shaken by the miracle's message, except for one brazen people, Amalek. Amalek ignored God's message and waged war with the Jewish people soon after they crossed through the Sea of Reeds while they were resting in Rephidim. The verses there record the miraculous battle against Amalek, where as long as Moshe's hands were raised, the Jewish people were strengthened and overpowered the Amalekite enemy. So, you may be wondering, good story, Shlomo, but what does this have to do with the Beit HaMikdash? Well, the destruction of Amalek actually has a lot to do both with the building and rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash, both in Jewish law and in Jewish idea. Take, for example, Tractate Sanhedrin, where our sages tell us that the Jewish people in the times of Yeshua were to do 3 things upon entering the land of Israel. They were to 1, appoint a king to rule over them, 2, destroy the remnants of Amalek, and then and only then 3, to build the Beit HaMikdash. While the destruction of Amalek was only a prerequisite to the building of the Beit HaMikdash in the times of Yeshua, the reason why Amalek's destruction was a necessary first step has an important lesson for what we must do to ready ourselves for the building of the third Beit HaMikdash, may it be soon in our days. Amalek, it exists both as a nation and as an idea. Amalek as a nation defined itself as an ignorer of the call to a God-conscious life. The cry of the Sea of Reeds had been heard by all other nations, but Amalek, it ignored it, and instead came to fight with the bearers of God consciousness, the Jewish people. They fought with the Jews because Amalek's entire philosophy is that there is no design or providence in this world. But the Jewish people, they believe the opposite. Everything in this world has a purpose that leads to the divine plan. Amalek as an ideal exists within each and every one of us. It's that voice of doubt that leads us to deny God's hand in our own personal stories. And even if we do have a moment of inspiration, we're often so distracted or cynical that we don't allow ourselves to attribute our day-to-day miracles to God. The Beit HaMikdash was and will be the epicenter of spiritual inspiration in the world. Jews and non-Jews alike would ascend to the Beit HaMikdash and taste the divine. I am sure that there were also people who came to the Beit HaMikdash and tried to explain away all the miracles without leaving room for God's providence in the picture. To proper ready ourselves for the third Beit HaMikdash, we have to work on being more aware of God's role in our lives. In this way, we will be able to receive God's abundant light as it radiates from the third Beit HaMikdash. May it be soon in our days. Shabbat Shalom.